Okay, we are live. Let me welcome those of us who have taken the time to be here this evening. And this is, part 2 of our discussion on a very interesting topic of integrative psychiatry, mending the mind. We covered some good ground the last time we were here. This time we are privileged to welcome persons online for the first time. Welcome to those who are joining us and will subsequently hear this after the live has ended. We welcome you, and we just want to trust that you will find this evening's session very informative and, as advertised, transformative as well. Anything to do with the mind, is of great importance, and coincidentally, this month is Mental Health Awareness Month internationally. So it's good timing, good synchrony, and this evening we are delving once again into a mental health topic. We are blessed this evening to have with us once again our expert panelists. Unfortunately, Sister Desiree Switchards could not be here with us this evening due to an emergency, but we know she's with us in spirit, and we'll hear from her again, no doubt. Or I can promise you that we will. This evening, though, we have with us Ms. Adelia Thomas and Dr. Mishka Duncan Adams. For those who need an introduction, Adelia Thomas is currently the Director of Social Protection, Ministry of National Mobilization et al. She is a trained psychologist, having obtained her BSc in psychology at the University of the West Indies and her MSc in clinical and counseling psychology at Asia University, Taiwan. She also runs a nonprofit organization, She is Lotus, where she raises awareness of women's health issues, particularly endometriosis, adenomyosis, PCOS, and fibroids, as well as advocates for women living with these illnesses. Ms. Thomas has a passion for bringing awareness to issues related to both mental health and women's health, and welcomes opportunities to share on topics related to them. And Dr. Mishka Duncan Adams is consultant pediatrician and neurologist at the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital. She also has a private practice at Stony Grounds and is coordinator for the developmental clinic in St. Vincent, with special interest in epilepsy and child development disorders, including autism, ADHD, and speech disorders. All right, so very qualified ladies that we have with us this evening. As we continue our discussion, we spent a good bit of time the last time looking at the acronym coined by psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Amen. We started looking at what is integrative psychiatry to begin with, psychiatry, psychology, and we're going to just kind of do a little rehash of that, and then touch a little bit on what the Bright Minds acronym is about. And we're going to get into some other aspects of what you might call nutritional psychology, or this emerging field of nutritional psychiatry, where there's a direct link now between your food and your mood, you might say. All right, how does food? Food makes a difference in how people behave, but more and more there seems to be even more connection that is coming out in the science in terms of that, sort of instinctive connection. You hear about people talk about being hungry, is that the word? Hungry. When you're hungry, that anger that can come with that, or irritability that can come with that. All right, so we'll look at food and that connection with our mental state. All right, so to our ladies once again, we want to just review quickly for us what are we trying to get at when we talk about integrative psychology, psychiatry.
So integrative psychology is, in a nutshell, combining traditional medicine with alternative forms of treatment. So it could be acupuncture, it could be massage, it could be maybe your herbal supplements, but combining both traditional with alternative.
So what would you say is, why is that? Why do we need to integrate? Why not just go strictly conventional?
I'd like to add that because when we treat a person, you should have to look at them holistically. We should not just treat a disease. The person doesn't come with just a disorder or disease. There's a social aspect, there's a spiritual aspect, there's a mental aspect. And so when we do a treatment, you have to cover as wide as possible for a treatment to be effective. A lot of times with mental disorders and with other illnesses, it's not as easy to say you just pop a pill and you will get better. A lot of times persons would have to go through psychotherapy. They'll have to work through and learn coping mechanisms. They'll have to have support groups to help them through this. And they have found more and more that, having as holistic as possible, using many different forms of therapies with an individual is more effective than just one type. So, in a way, if you can integrate all the positives, the outcome would be much better.
Can I add here the importance of integrating the person's culture into their treatment?
Yes.
It's a big focus in psychology, being culturally sensitive, because what might work for me as a Vincentian might not work for maybe somebody from India or Taiwan. So, for example, with Asian cultures, there is limited eye contact. It's a collectivistic society, so family is important. So incorporating family therapy is important. Whereas maybe somebody from the States, it's a more individualistic country. So they may not want their families involved, but somebody from a country in Asia will want their families involved. And if I am from the States as a therapist, I need to be culturally sensitive and not ignore that, because it will impact treatment.
Okay, that's a good point. We often hear, now you talk about family, we often hear about, in relation to persons who are within the mental health system, that sometimes families, for want of a better word, abandon them, or maybe is it that the families don't know what to do, how to help their family members get through these disorders. That just occurs to me as you spoke there.
I would say from experience in the mental health field, St. Vincent and the Grenadines has a very big issue with stigma and discrimination towards persons who have mental illnesses. And so if you have a family member who has a mental health condition, it's seen as something negative, something not good, something that, is like a shame on the family. That's how it's looked at. And so families tend to distance themselves from that because they don't want that sort of stigma to come to the family. And let's be real, in St. Vincent, when somebody has a mental illness, the sort of names that we call them and how we refer to them and how we speak to them and about them, no family member will want that. And so we have a very big problem with that, and it's causing families to sort of distance themselves. And also, there is the issue that there's a lack of understanding of what mental illnesses are and how they can affect you and what can be done to help that person. So I think it's a two-edged sword.
Yes, and that brings us to raising awareness, education. Persons would have certain ideas that are not really bound in, it may not be bound in what is reality. And when we stigmatize someone, obviously it's going to make it harder for people to come forward to say they have a mental health issue. And at the end of the day, to destigmatize, firstly, would be to understand, you know, to be aware that this can happen to anyone. To be aware that in certain families there's a genetic component of it. And to know that persons are not to blame for the illnesses that they have, you know. A lot of times too, as medical professional, and I liked how you said we have to be culturally sensitive, because one of the things that we learn about being sensitive to others too is not making stereotypes. So stereotyping a person would be putting them into a particular category without actually getting to know that person. Now, it's okay to make a generalization to say most persons that have this tend to show that, but not to say everybody with this has that, because that's stereotyping. But generalizing is having a general idea that most persons, but knowing that everyone has their individuality.
You have exceptions.
Yes,
as
and
well.
so we are, as people, as a population, as people, we tend to stereotype, which is not good. And we also tend to stigmatize, which is also it's the killer of any growth that can take place when it comes, and especially when it comes to mental health. And to be able to get past that, we have to understand, we have to educate ourselves. Families need education, we need to show support, and we also have to let persons know that they are not to blame. They are not to blame for whatever issue they may have.
That's interesting because we, in our initial session in the series, we talked about the faith-mind connection, and there's this issue of the perception of a sort of a spiritual, how it's put is that the person is maybe demon-possessed. There is that religious perspective that this is demon possession and not just mental illness, right? So there's that aspect of the stigmatization that we have to deal with, and we're approaching this as a faith community. So there's a challenge there in terms of yes, acknowledging that there is a spiritual element, but not using that to stigmatize and say this person is demon possessed. So you don't actually give them the kind of treatment that they need. It's interesting too, because I recently I was at the mental health center, took a group of young people there to bring some encouragement, some inspiration to the patients and the staff. And I remember one young lady made a comment, one of the young persons there made a comment that she was very impressed with one of the patients was repeating something that was said. It was a scripture passage that was read, and the gentleman was able to repeat the scripture, the chapter and verse, right? And she was quite impressed. And it said to me that, there's a perception too that persons with mental illness have maybe near to zero mental capacity, So there's a sense, how do we help people to understand that having a mental illness does not mean that you cannot be functional, right? And at least since you still have some cognitive abilities about you, right?
Yes, and that has to do with education, because there are many different mental illnesses. There are many different illnesses. whole wide of, from mood disorders to other disorders, and also there are different severities within, right? So you cannot just automatically assume that persons with mental illnesses have low IQ or that they are incapable of doing certain things. The best thing would be first getting that person assessed, getting a proper diagnosis, and knowing what are their functional capabilities, how they can, be part of the workforce, and making persons feel that they're able to do stuff. Because a lot of times when a person is diagnosed with a mental illness, automatically we assume, and that's where we go back to the stereotyping and all of that, that persons are not capable. And it's interesting to know that a lot of times in the management and treatment of certain mental illnesses, regaining a person's independence is fundamental in the road to their recovery.
Yeah, that's true. Which is why I know at the mental health center they do have we call it occupational therapy type activities for the patients there. So recapping again a little bit, we touched on Dr. Amen's, and I recommend this book very highly, Dr. Daniel Amen's book. It's a very ambitious title. It's called The End of Mental Illness. And in there, Dr. Amen looks at several different factors. We touched on them quite a bit the last time that play a significant role in mental wellness and mental health disorder treatment. So just to run through them quickly again, because it's going to set the stage for what we're coming to next. The acronym is Bright Minds. For those who didn't hear the last time, the Bright Minds: B, blood flow; R, retirement, aging; I for inflammation; G for genetics; H for head trauma; T for toxins; M, mental health; I for immunity or infections and infections; N for neurohormone issues; D for diabetes, that's diabetes and obesity combined, right? And S for sleep issues. Now, as I review this list again, one of the things that struck me was that, and this is Dr. Amen, he takes, again, an integrative approach. He tries to directly scan. He does a lot of brain scans, and he makes a direct connection between the health of the brain and the health of the mind. How do you explain that? We normally think of the brain as a separate thing. I mean, it's different. Brain is different from, maybe you can explain. Brain versus mind, and why does Dr. Amen, why can't he make this kind of connection?
Okay, so it's pretty complex to explain in the most. So the brain is the anatomical structure. It's what you can see. It is tangible. It is, when you Google the brain and you see that organ that's there in your body, that's made up of neurons and a whole lot of different cells and so on, that's the brain. And the brain is very intricate. It is the workhouse of the body where it basically tells us every single thing that we need to do and how we need to do it. So you can do transplants of a lot of different things, but you can't transplant the brain. Within the brain, well, if you transplant the brain, you transplant the person, because within the brain, there's the consciousness. So consciousness is something that there's a whole lot of different definitions for consciousness. Consciousness can be being awake, alert, and aware of your environment. But there's a higher level of consciousness where your perceptions, your feelings, your emotions, it's very intricate when it comes to that. So disorders of the brain, which is more neurological, could be because of a disruption of the anatomy. It could be because of the disruptions of different chemicals like neurotransmitters that work together, and there might be some disruption there. But with the mind, you're not only awake and aware, but we also have memories And the way that we have memories, there's an interaction with everything, all our senses that we have, integrated with our genetic makeup, integrated with these neuronal networks, give us a higher level of being aware, and our ability also to take in everything that we've taken in and to make sense of it. If I'm trying to break it down into the most simplest form. Now, when it comes to the mind, there's different categories of the mind. You have your conscious mind, which would be the things that we are aware of and remember. And you have your preconscious mind, which is like your working mind, when you can bring up a memory from somewhere and you just bring it, it's to the surface, but it's not always there. You just have it available when you're ready. And then you have the subconscious mind. And that part is the part of a man that has a lot of different things that our feelings, emotions, things that would have impacted us and we might have forgotten. And this is where it is thought that many of the mental illnesses and neuroses, what they would call mental disorders, would originate. Desires that we probably would have put down there. And you know, if you look, there's an iceberg that, can't remember the name of the iceberg, but the subconscious mind, where you have all your repressed memories and all the things that you probably didn't think that you remembered, all the trauma and all of that. There's a lot going on down there that we are not aware of. And because of that, the way that we act, the way we respond to things, the way that we perceive things, a lot of it has to do with our subconscious. And so it makes a person very complex because we are not just a biological being, but the mind is way more powerful than just the biology. And there's a very close interaction between the mind and the body. The way we perceive things, your truth is not my truth. What you see is not what I see. We can have an event where one thing happens and you interview 100 people, and everybody will have one aspect slightly different because the perception of truth is a mixture of what is actually there, but with how we integrate it, how we perceive it, and how we process it. You know, so, yeah, the mind is a whole, and then the alterations of the mind is a whole different ball game.
Very, very interesting. So, as you spoke there, I remember my younger daughter got up and told me she had a dream. One got into the dream, but it just brought back to mind, as you mentioned, the subconscious, because I'm trying to tell her it's just a dream, you know. But she's thinking there's more to it than that. I mean, I'm not a dream interpreter, so I wouldn't venture in there. But sometimes dreams might make sense, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just, you know. So you tell somebody that the dream has no real significance to it apart from just being something that you might have been thinking about in your subconscious or something like that.
Right, so your dream might be different, might have different meanings. It might be what we call the remnants of the day remnant. So it might be just aspects of things that happened in the day. But within a dream, it might also reflect your fears, your aspirations. It may reflect certain things that you're going through. And it might be mixed with the remnants of the day, your mood at the moment, your fears and aspirations, you know, the last thing you said. So it's really hard. You can't really just tell from a particular dream that it may have significance or not. But reoccurring dreams generally tend to have significance. Dreams with specific themes tend to have, I'm not an interpreter of dreams either, but yes, the dreams can have significance.
Okay. Now, one of the things that, to get back to Dr. Amen, one of the things that I know from his mnemonic, he places a lot of emphasis on, because he's trying to use an integrative approach and wean, that's the word, persons off medication, or at least try to avoid medication as much as possible. Not demonizing medication, but he notes foods for almost for every one of the interventions based on the risk factors that he notes there. He has some kind of supplement or food item. So for example, for blood flow, he mentions beets, cayenne pepper, and rosemary. A lot of these things are food items that we are familiar with, but we don't think of them as having a direct link or impact on our brains and our minds, right? So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. He talks about things like walnuts. Some of these things are not really Caribbean food. I wonder what is the Caribbean equivalent. Can you talk about cultural, appropriateness, right? Cultural awareness. Turmeric, well, we have plenty of that. So these are foods that they taste good, and we partake of them. Chocolate is also mentioned. Blueberries, not really a Caribbean thing, but we may have substitutes for that. Brassicas, cabbage. Well, he talks about 8 servings, which we always say, get your fruits and veggies, especially now we have mangoes and so on. Fish, garlic, onions, mushrooms, flaxseed, fiber, spinach, cinnamon. These are not things that we normally think of as, having a brain.
But you notice a trend in the things that you're saying, right? The things that you're saying are things that generally what we promote all the time, like all the time, even from what we promote from in the church, like certain things when,
right.
limiting caffeine, eating more healthy grains and your nuts and your fruits and your vegetables. And it just shows that, like for example, for persons who have dementia, Alzheimer's, one of the things that they would recommend for at least decreasing how, quickly you would progress would be having a person on a Mediterranean diet. They use that in the literature,
yes,
the Mediterranean diet.
I've seen that, yeah.
And when you talk about the Mediterranean diet, you talk about fish, you talk about your beans and your hummus, which is the chickpea and all of that. And cutting back the smoking and the alcohol. But these are things that if we sat down and looked at it, these are things that we promote already. Now, the world has been moving a lot towards the industries have the food today. The majority of food today is so industrialized. There's so many additives. There's so many components from what they use for the pesticides, from what they put in the stuff to make it a certain color, the candy, the sweets. There's a whole epidemic for food that is not back to nature. And the truth about it is that what is more fueling and better for your body are the basic, the less additives, the better.
Unprocessed
foods.
Food stuff, yeah.
Whole
foods, they call it
whole
foods, yeah.
And your vitamins, your minerals, you get your basic, and it fuels the body and it fuels the mind. So you'd find that a lot of times persons are talking about using your beet, using your carrot, using your foods that are red and rich in antioxidants and so on. But if you actually look at a plate, what is recommended, it's the same thing that we have been saying all along. All along from the very creation of time.
So one of the things I'm seeing, as you mentioned, is that, we talk about New Start, the New Start, program, nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, trust in God. It's basically a lot of the science now, the nutritional science, the psychiatry, a lot of these sciences it's basically like providing further reinforcement or support for the Edenic diet, if you want to call it that, right? So that's a good thing. I mean, the challenge though that people have is that we have to deal with advertising, a lot of the food that is pushed and provided in, food establishments and so on, in schools. I don't want to go there too much, but a lot of the food is unhealthy and over-processed. So, that's a challenge. So then, what does that say about, are we feeding our minds? We say we're feeding our bodies, but really we are feeding our minds, right? It seems, right? So what does it say about how our young people, our children are eating and the effect that that has on their mind? I mean, you're dealing with, well, I don't know if you can take this.
It goes back to me to being culturally sensitive. Now, I find that this modern society, we are very busy. And the foods that we are eating are a reflection of that. Convenience foods. What's easiest to make right now? What's the easiest thing I can grab to feed my family? Because we are busy. We are working, we are going to school, we have after-school activities, we have church, we have all these things, and we are not setting aside that dedicated time to our nutrition, because I think we have lost how important that is, not just for the body, as you said, but also for the mind. We have all the foods available to us. We don't have the blueberries and the strawberries, but we have local foods. I always say, eat what is in season. When it's mango season, eat your mangoes. When it's plum season, eat your plums. Bananas are always there. Eat what is in season and try to grow as much as possible. You don't have to have a large land space. I don't. But my father has been growing things in barrels, in buckets, whatever he could find, he's growing things.
Container gardening.
Yes, he is. So we have ginger and turmeric, as you listed there, our sweet peppers. I mean, everything that you could think of that can grow in a container is growing in our yard. So we just have to set aside a little time each day to do these things. And I mean, I know I talked about convenience, but just little things that can help us out. When you have some time, try to batch cook. Batch prep some things. We know the beans are good for us. We can cook a big pot of beans, portion it out into your family size portion, put it in the freezer. So when you need it, it's already cooked. You just have to flavor it how you want. Batch cook some meat, whether it is your fish or your gluten or your whatever it is that you're using. Batch cook that, set it aside in the freezer, portion it out so that when you're ready, it is there. Just little things that can help to make our lives a little better will go a really long way.
Very good advice there. So again, we don't have a lot of time to explore this. Again, I would encourage persons to get Dr. Amen's book or watch one of his talks on YouTube. He has a few talks dealing with this issue of diet, supplements, and other exercise as well plays a big role, and we'll come to that again shortly. Now, one of the other proponents of, you might say, integrative psychiatry is a doctor by the name of Chris Palmer. He's a psychiatrist, and he has put forward what is termed the metabolic theory of mental illness. And he did this in his book, Brain Energy. Now, this theory deals with what is called the ketogenic diet. Now, if you have never heard, well, I think a lot of persons by now would have heard about ketogenic diet, but not necessarily for dealing with mental illness. So I'm going to ask Dr. Duncan Adams to tell us a little bit more about define what the ketogenic diet is, what it's traditionally used for, and the connection now with mental health.
Okay, so the ketogenic diet is a diet that it's not as balanced as the regular balanced diet that we know. You know, you have your 6 food groups, and you have your proteins, your carbs, your food from animals, you have your nuts and legumes and so on, right? And it's supposed to be in a specific proportion for a balanced diet. Now, the ketogenic diet, you'd have a skewing of the diet where you'd have persons taking in more fats and oils and more proteins and some carbs. So you tend to have a disparity in the proportions as compared to the regular balanced diet that we all know. Now, Initially, the ketogenic diet came out and it was used in research, but then it took off on the, I would say, the airways, on the internet, and it went like wildfire because one of the side effects that the ketogenic diet causes would be weight loss. And so it has different names, but the most popular one would be like the Atkins diet, which is a modified version of the ketogenic diet. And you know, a lot of persons use it for weight loss, and their body go under a certain level of ketosis and so on, and they lose the weight, right? But the ketogenic diet has been used in a lot of different researches when it comes to the uses in mental illness and also in neurological illnesses. One of the things that the diet has found is that it can affect your mood, right? Now, it is well known that persons who are on the ketogenic diet, and because this type of diet is not the one like it's done like for medical purposes, some persons will tell you that you can be in a bad mood, or it can change your mood based on the proportions of the food that you eat. And we already spoke about that in the prior session, that the foods that you eat, or the lack of certain foods, or the use of certain foods in different combinations can change your mood accordingly. The medically used ketogenic diet, it has found a lot of usage, especially in neurology, for seizures, especially those seizures that are called refractory seizures that do not respond well to certain anti-epileptic therapies. So persons may have been on 1, 2, 3, generally on 3 anti-epileptic medications, and they're not responding, and these persons tend to have what are known as epileptic encephalopathies. And they have found that when a person is at a certain level of ketosis with the use of the ketogenic diet, it decreases neuronal excitability, and so the person tends to seize less or have much more controllable seizures. Now, the medically induced ketogenic is very strict. It's very, very strict. Usually, there's a trained dietitian who monitors the patient, who calculates the diet specific to the person's weight, age, size, and all of that. And they come up with a diet plan that has to be stuck to strictly while they monitor the individual over a certain number of months. And it's something that they tend to do over a certain time frame. So it's not like forever either. And then the person is weaned off as a treatment plan. But it's very strict. And there's, it has been shown that it has a lot of improvement for persons who have neurological disorders, especially seizures. They started doing more research on it and its usage in mental illness, and they have found some promising aspects when it comes to like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and so on, that it can improve the energy of persons, the overall energy. It can improve their moods. I actually came across one study that they did recently, and they published recently actually from Stanford, where they studied persons who had schizophrenia and bipolar disorder with the use of the ketogenic diet, and they would have found that but they had a specific combination. I think it's 60% of the diet was fat, 30% was protein. This is this study specifically, and 10% was...
A lot of fat?
Yeah, a lot. So 60% of the plates are not general, was fat. 30% was protein according to their proportions, and 10% was carbs. So that's the 100%. So, other things are not there that, for a balanced diet. And they would have found that a lot of persons from that study showed improvement in their mood, their quality of life, their energy level, and many of these persons required a less usage of medications. Sure. So they looked at it as a possibility For individuals, it might help persons to not be on so many meds, or an option for persons who have side effects and so on. Obviously, they're still studying. It was a pilot study, but it has shown a lot of promise.
Okay, that's good news. I'm just wondering because I saw in Dr. Palmer's case, he had not severe depression, but he had some depression and he adopted a ketogenic diet. And he was able to get over his depression. There's another lady who read his book and basically followed his plan, but she did they call it a vegan keto, because keto is generally a lot of meat, animal products, but she was vegetarian, so she found a way, very difficult because vegan is restricting, keto is restricting, so to have a vegan keto diet is not easy to do. But she was able to do it, and I think she had bipolar, and she was able to cure her bipolar using that approach as well. So it's something very promising, and it's good to know. But again, the challenge is, how do you actually implement it in our cultural context, and not just in our cultural context, but in an institutional context, like at a mental health center or a clinic. How do you make it practical? There was a case of a doctor who, so I want to answer that question, but another example, there's a doctor reported in the book Integrative Medicine of a patient who had bipolar, was diagnosed with bipolar, and she was on several medications. And over a 6-month period, they were able to basically wean her, he says, of all her medications. And he started her on a ketogenic diet, right? And then she was also given some supplements, multivitamins, extra B complex, vitamin C. And when I read it, I said, but these are things that you, like normal stuff, like supplements, vitamins. Why would vitamins play a critical role in mental disorder? Is it that we are not getting enough basic nourishment that we're supposed to get, right? How do you account for that?
Okay, several things were going through my mind as you were speaking. I was just reflecting on what Dr. Duncan Adams was saying, in that the keto diet, medical keto, that is, needs to be strictly adhered to and supervised. That is the basic foundation. Let's start there. So I can't go today and say, okay, I'm going on keto to heal whatever illness or disorder that I may have, because I don't know what proportion is going to be right for me. I may adopt your proportion, but it is not going to work for me. And the second thing that stuck out to me in reading and listening to you is that it is not a long-term sustainable solution, because the body cannot do well on that high amount of fat long-term. That also comes with its own side effects. Just imagine eating 60% fat at every meal, day in and day out. What do you think is happening? Because whether it's good fat or bad fat, it's going to affect you.
Out of proportion.
It is totally out of proportion. So those are two things that we have to bear in mind when we are considering medical keto. So that is the two things. And then you asked about how do we, it's integrated into our treatment. We have to find a medical professional who is knowledgeable and a registered dietitian or nutritionist who is knowledgeable.
I was just going to ask about the dietitian aspect. I know we have dietitians here, we have nutritionists.
Yes.
You must how does this factor for them?
You must have somebody who is knowledgeable in how
it's done.
It's done
it's
for a particular disorder or for a particular illness, and that requires additional training on top of what you do in your regular degree.
So I'd like to add that for incorporation of the ketogenic diet into institutions and so on. So a lot of times, it will be backed up. So to be able to incorporate it, it has to be backed up by a lot of different scientific research. Now, to know, just so that you know, the world is changing with respect to the opinion of the usage of the ketogenic diet in neurological and mental disorders. Incidentally, last month, April, I was supposed to go attend. I was unable, myself, a nutritionist, a dietitian, we were supposed to travel to Jamaica. We were invited to a conference to talk about the ketogenic diet and its usage in neurological disorders, right? And this was something that was planned and so on with the help of the International League Against Epilepsy, right? I have seen the effects of the ketogenic diet firsthand on its effects on epilepsy. A few years ago in my residency, it was just out, new, and they were using it, and were incorporating it for persons with epileptic encephalopathies, and it has shown to work. However, I must repeat that it is something that when we implement it, it has to be backed with various aspects of research. And it has been showing with the different researches that it has its utility, right? And I am confident that in the future, it would be something that is also a widespread option as, as another alternative. It's already becoming an alternative, even more so in neurology. And they are seeing the effects and the promise of it in mental health. They actually, that Stanford pilot study, and Stanford University is a very respectable, it's a highly respected university on a worldwide scale, and they actually talked about the metabolic theory of mental illness, which was also something that was mentioned. And coming out of the pilot study, they did find a lot of promise. And there are other pilot studies all around. So it's only a matter of time, with enough research and enough, you can see the benefits of it, on a bigger scale.
One of the things that Dr. Amen touched on here, just to backtrack a bit, and you'll tell me how this factors. For several of his interventions, he mentions vitamin D. Now, I remember when COVID came in, right? I learned, that was a learning point for me. What I knew of vitamin D was, okay, it has some role in helping you with your bones and so on, but I never made an immune system connection. Now he's making a brain connection with vitamin D. How do you account for that? Which means that, you mean getting sunlight has an effect on my mind? Somehow?
Yes. We practice integrative psychiatry in St. Vincent without even realizing it. Truly, yes. Because when we are talking to clients about things that can naturally help to improve their mood, one of the things is sunlight. I know we are surrounded by sunlight, but it is shown that those of us, we have in the Caribbean and in Africa and those countries, we have a lot of sunlight. We are actually low in vitamin D because it is so hot. We are running from the sun, but the early morning sun and the late evening sun have been proven to be beneficial in increasing our vitamin D levels. And you asked about the connection between sunlight and mood. There is seasonal depression. So persons who live in those cold climates where there's winter and long winters at that, they get very depressed during winter. And there's been shown to be a connection between the lower levels of vitamin D that they're getting during winter and they are supplemented with vitamin D to help to sort of improve their mood while the sunlight is limited. So I know we are running from the sun, but this is my encouragement to us. Early morning sun before 9 o'clock and anytime after 4 o'clock, let's get our sunlight, our vitamin D in. It will help to boost your mood, and it's also good for your body. And you had earlier asked about supplementation.
Yes.
That you had read about with Dr. Amen. When we are physically ill, it can affect our mental health. And taking care of our bodies is taking care of our brain and our mind. Now, there is research that shows that some supplements are very helpful. So our zinc and our vitamin C and the D and B vitamins have also been shown to be very helpful in improving our mood and improving our mental health. And a lot of these things we can get from food, but again, going back to the conversation, that we are, be so busy that we're taking up the convenience foods and buying the KFC and the Subway, where a lot of the nutritional value.
I don't want KFC and Subway to come and
we apologize,
sue
KFC
us.
and Subway, but we are eating a lot of fast food. That the nutritional value is not there, or it is very low. So we are not getting the vitamins that we need and the micronutrients that we need that we get from vegetables and from fruit. And something as simple as sea moss that has, I think it's 92 of the micronutrients that your body needs. That we have here, and we're shipping it overseas.
I wasn't aware of that. I probably need to get some sim.
And it's the
heard,
newest
yes.
craze now that the persons in the Grenadines, especially, they're shipping it overseas. It is in such demand.
Wow.
It is a big thing. It is a
We
big
have
thing.
it here, and how many of us are using it?
Yeah.
Imagine that.
It's funny because as you mentioned that, I was listening to a presentation by a Dr. Ranjbar, but she's an integrative psychiatrist as well at the University of Arizona, and she was citing a paper talking about micronutrient deficiency and ADHD. There's some connections there. And now you mentioned this thing with the CMAS, because one of my brothers who, as in blood brothers, brought that to my attention as well, with the CMAS and all the micronutrients. He's an ardent vegan, right? So I wasn't always a big CMAS, we call it Irish mass, fan. But when you look at the research, you realize there's a lot to it. So again, it goes back to this thing of, and maybe in future we'll do something more detailed with the, for those who are, real nutrition buffs. There's a lot of nutrition science that is coming out that is looking at same old-time food, as you would say, food that you grew up hearing about, or a lot of the herbs and stuff that we have around, but have not really valued or they maybe didn't know that these things had all this nutritional value in them. And now there's a brain connection, that is making it even more interesting. So again, in wrapping up, because our time is gone, the final question was, again, this where do we go from here? How do we started touching on it, but is there anything else that we need to do? Because I'm thinking, maybe we need better cooks, or we need just like some basic nutrition programs, just to bring it down to brass tacks, so to speak, for patients or for families. How do you make this practical in terms of preparing good food? But it's not just the food, because we know there are other aspects, because if somebody's on medication, you don't want to take them off cold turkey, because that might make things worse. So how do you balance all of this? The exercise, the nutrition, the spiritual support, to make all of this work within our, again, cultural, context, right, as we try to wrap up.
Well, I made a little list here.
Very good.
So in addition to the nutrition, we need to talk about physical exercise. And I know when we hear the word exercise, we automatically think weight loss.
Gym.
And yes, going to the gym, but physical exercise does not always equal weight loss and heavy lifting of weights and all of that. Just taking a simple walk in your neighborhood for 30 to 45 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week, does wonders. If you could swim, even better, go to the beach. Yes. If you know how to play basketball or netball, go do it with some friends. I mean, just incorporating little things that you already do. And
if it's enjoyable, you're more likely to do it. Yeah.
Movement. And the theme for this year's Mental Health Awareness Month is movement.
Okay.
Moving for our mental health is the theme for this year's Mental Health Awareness Month. And so I'm just encouraging persons to incorporate more movement. If you like to dance, put on some music and just dance in your living room or in your bedroom. Incorporate movement in a way that is fun and enjoyable to you because you're more likely to keep at it. Sure. Some other things that we didn't get to touch on, but I think is important. Parents helping to nurture their kids and their children's mental health. I don't know if it's still happening, but when I was little with hair, children are to be seen and not heard. And so a lot of times when they're having their little problems, well, it's little to us, but big to them.
I think we're past that stage, though. A lot of these young people.
But even though...
But it still happens. You still have abuse. You still have... Yeah.
That even though they are more talkative now, how many adults, how many parents are actually listening to what they have to say and helping them to navigate what's going on in this world. It's different than when I grew up, when you grew up. They're exposed to so much more now. And so parents helping to nurture their children's mental health from a young age helps them to learn how positive coping skills. They know how to interact with people. They know how to deal with the issues of life in a healthy way. And the last thing I'll say is, I know I'm talking about children a lot, but it's
Child's Month, so you
it's
have...
also Child's Month, and I got into psychology because I firmly was of the belief that if we could help a lot of our persons when they are children to learn how to cope and to protect them from trauma, then we would not have so many adults who cannot cope and who are experiencing so many difficulties.
Exactly. Yeah.
So protecting our children from trauma is another thing that we need to work on. Too often we turn a blind eye to things that are happening to our children because it's not my child. So this has nothing to do with me. And we know something terrible is happening to this child. And we don't say anything and we don't do anything. And then this child now grows up with all of this trauma, with all of these issues that are burdening them. And
that overflows into the society.
Of course.
Yeah,
so protecting our children from trauma is also important. And I know that was the last thing, but my last thing is helping persons to know how to understand their emotions and be able to manage them. And again, taking us back to positive and healthy coping mechanisms. Yes, you're going to feel angry. Yes, you're going to feel sad. But how do I manage these emotions? What do I do when I feel a certain way in a healthy manner?
Yes, very good points.
So you left me speechless because you touched on a lot of things that I would have wanted to say. But when I listen to you, I'm going to get to what I want to say to end off. But when I listen to you, there's something that I wanted to mention because especially when you said about nurturing children and so on. And I don't know if anybody would have heard about learned helplessness, right? And when you were talking, that's just the only word that I could think of learned helplessness. And a lot of mental issues that we have today, depression and coping disorders, is because of learned helplessness. Now, big persons, little persons, and especially small children as they grow up, but anybody can be a victim of this, where we are actually told repetitively that we cannot be more than we are, that we are not special or unique, that we are not God's perfect creation, and that we have a lot of potential in us. So a lot of times, instead of encouraging a person, which we're supposed to edify persons up and lift them up, we break them down. We tell them they can't, they will never amount to anything. You're never going to grow up good. You're going to be just like this person and that person. You're making it in life, you're going to end up in jail. Now imagine you hearing that daily, and you have to deal with your emotions, you can't cope. You go out and you fail out at school, and then society puts you as a failure. And then you build up a wall of defense thinking nobody cares about me anyways, so why even try about it? And then you do end up along that path of destruction that was set to you even before, and we don't break the cycle. And so we see negative cycles in society that repeats itself for generations until somebody breaks it and said, no, I can. Or somebody, a mentor, a positive person, or a pastor, or somebody at church, or somebody at work, or wherever, tells that person that they're more than they can be. Right? And that's where it goes to the holistic approach also, for tying it in for mental illness. No man is an island. We need to support each other. No man can do it alone. Life is difficult as it is. It is full of stress. It is full of uncertainties. And a lot of times people have to put on their clothes. They have to put a face out there. They have to show the world a certain facade. And a lot of times they could be hurt inside. You use that video you saw the other day where the guy who was going to the game, and he was the one who was there shouting and happy and seemingly fine. And the other one always looked grumpy, and then you only see the grumpy looking one by himself, and you're wondering, and the one who committed suicide was the one that seemed happy. So being able to deal with mental illness is one, being able to have an understanding, to be perceptive of other person's emotions, for persons to always try to edify persons and pick them up instead of pulling them down. So that support system is really important. To having a safe place for persons to be able to express themselves, and to know despite whatever they're going through, they're not going to be judged or stigmatized or criticized for it. You know? That goes a long way. Being able to express yourself to the point where, you get that catharsis and you get it out is a path towards healing that is much more profound than just medication alone. So it's fueling your mind with positive people, positive thoughts, positive environments, but that has to come from all of us that would help that individual to fuel their mind, fueling their body and their mind with the food that we put in, with the influences that we put in, building in our spirituality, having a faith system. It's more than just a pill. It is very integrative, it's very holistical, and if you want to see growth, it's much more than just treating the disease, than trying to heal the person as a whole. So that would be my takeaway in wrap up.
Yes. You have a...
Just as you're talking, sorry, it came to me, the importance of connection and community. And this is a faith-based forum that we are having. And I don't want to leave without emphasizing the importance.
Taking the words out my mouth right now. Go ahead.
The importance of your faith community. It has been shown to be a protective factor in dealing with or managing mental illnesses, and in just general dealing with the issues of life. And faith is important, yes, but the community that makes up church, the body of believers, the people coming together and supporting each other is so important. And sometimes we have persons who come to church and sit and, you know, they're lost. And we as church members may, you know, we fall short sometimes in reaching out to persons. You don't see sister so-and-so in a long time and you don't call. Oh, she'll come back eventually. So I want to use this opportunity to encourage us to be a little more kind to each other and to be a community of believers instead of just people who go to church. We need to build communities in our churches that will really help persons to be able to deal with what is happening with them and build connections with each other. It's good for all involved. You may think that, you know, I'm the strong one, but you never know what can happen in your life. I mean, a family member dying, or you get a diagnosis of an illness, it may just throw you off. Anything can happen to any one of us. So let's build communities and connections.
Well said, well said. And that is a very good note on which to end. Sorry, we have to end. It sounds like it could merit a part 3, but we'll leave it there for now. I really, really want to thank our panelists this evening for bringing such insights and knowledge to the discussion as we wrap up part 2 of our Mending the Mind topic in this seminar series. Indeed, as Odelia just said, you know, community is so important, and you cannot overstate that. We are born into families. God made us a part of families for a reason. So we want to reinforce that. And to say as well that, you know, that holistic approach, integrative approach. I have an agriculture background, and this word integrative keeps coming up. There's a whole field called integrative agriculture now. Integrative seems to be in everything now, all right, including medicine, including subspecialties in medicine, because science is basically supporting the view that we are made by the Creator with all these different facets to us that need to be incorporated in the healing process, all right, including the healing of the mind. And I just want to leave with one plug for the calendar. We're going to be promoting it. It's the Dr. Amrie Morris-Patterson Mental and Spiritual Wellness Calendar 2024. We're going to be posting soft copies, but for persons who would like a hard copy, you can get in touch with me. We'll see how we can make that reality for you. All right, we're going to be gifting them to some schools as well. We have already given out several copies, but we have some more that we're going to be distributing as part of our donations to several schools. So you can look forward to that. So once again, thanks so much for tuning in this evening and for attending. And we look forward to the next time when we will join you, or you will join us in this very beneficial, we hope, to everyone, seminar series. So until then, God bless and take care, and we'll see you soon.